Montana Territory, 1878. Miles of untamed wilderness stretched across the Rocky Mountain foothills, where only the hardiest souls ventured to carve out a living. The setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Heath O'Malley guided his cattle northward, the weight of solitude heavy on his shoulders despite the 5 ranch hands riding alongside him. At 24, Heath had already seen enough death to last several lifetimes. The Civil War had claimed his father and older brother, leaving him the sole heir to a struggling Texas ranch. When drought threatened to destroy what remained of his family legacy, he'd sold everything to purchase 300 head of longhorn cattle, gambling his entire future on this drive to the booming mining towns of Montana. No sense in putting down roots anywhere, Heath often told his men during nights around the campfire. The West takes everything you love eventually. This belief had served him well, keeping him focused solely on survival. Attachments were dangerous distractions in a land where nature and man alike seemed bent on destruction. Family, love, connection, these were luxuries he couldn't afford, not when each day demanded every ounce of his strength and attention. Yet in quiet moments, watching stars blanket the vast prairie sky, a hollow ache would spread through his chest. His ranch hands had families waiting back home, wives, children, parents who prayed for their safe return. Heath had no one. No letters reached him on the trail, no face appeared in his dreams at night. Just the endless horizon and the cattle that represented his last chance at building something meaningful. The drive had gone well until they reached the treacherous mountain passes of southern Montana. Spring thaws had turned narrow trails into death traps of mud and loose stone. They'd already lost 12 head to a ravine 2 days back, and Heath's mood had darkened with each passing mile. "We should make camp soon, boss," called Emmett, his trail cook and the oldest of the bunch at 45. "Weather's turning sour." Heath nodded, scanning the clouded sky. They needed shelter before the threatening storm broke, but the trail ahead disappeared into dense pine forest with no clearing in sight. Despite his exhaustion, he pushed forward, trusting his instincts to find safe passage. What Heath couldn't know was that 10 miles ahead, 20-year-old Violet Blackburn was fighting her own battle for survival, one that would irrevocably alter both their destinies. Violet kneeled beside her father's sickbed in their small trading post nestled in a protected valley. At 20 years old, with honey blonde hair pulled into a practical braid and wearing a simple blue calico dress worn thin from washing, she had assumed responsibilities far beyond her years. 3 weeks earlier, her father had developed a racking cough that had quickly deteriorated into pneumonia, leaving her to manage their isolated outpost alone. "Pa, you need to rest," she insisted, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "I've handled the store just fine these past weeks." James Blackburn, once robust and commanding, now lay gaunt and pale. "Violet, you know what's coming," he whispered between labored breaths. "You can't stay here alone after I'm gone. Your aunt in St. Louis." "I'm not leaving," she interrupted firmly. "This post is everything we've built since Mother died. I know every inch of these mountains, every trail and stream. The Blackburns don't abandon what's theirs." Her father's eyes closed in exhaustion, unconvinced but too weak to argue further. Violet moved to the window, watching storm clouds gather over the mountain pass. The trading post had been their home for 5 years. Ever since her mother's death had prompted her father to seek a new beginning away from painful memories. She'd grown from a sheltered 15-year-old girl into a competent frontier woman who could hunt, trade with miners and Indians alike, and manage inventory with meticulous precision. Yet despite her capabilities, whispers from passing travelers suggested a woman alone couldn't possibly maintain the outpost. "You need a husband out here," they'd say, as if her worth depended entirely on securing male protection. These comments only strengthened her resolve to prove her independence. Still, in moments of honesty, Violet acknowledged the loneliness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her. The nearest neighbor lived 20 miles away, and winter could isolate them completely for months. Each night, she would read by lamplight from one of the precious books they'd brought from back east, escaping briefly into worlds of connection and belonging that seemed increasingly remote from her reality. The first heavy raindrops struck the window glass, pulling Violet from her thoughts. She needed to secure the livestock before the storm worsened. Donning her oilskin coat, She headed toward the small barn, unaware that fate was driving a desperate young cowboy directly into her path. The storm erupted with sudden fury, turning the mountain trail into a slurry of mud and debris. Heath's cattle grew increasingly agitated as lightning split the sky, the entire herd threatening to scatter with each thunderclap. "We need shelter now," Heath shouted above the wind, his soaked shirt clinging to his lean frame. "There's no controlling them in this." Just as the words left his mouth, a massive lightning bolt struck a pine just yards ahead. The deafening crack sent the lead cattle into a panicked frenzy, and within seconds, the entire herd was stampeding directly toward a steep ravine hidden by the driving rain. Heath spurred his horse forward, attempting to turn the leaders. Racing ahead of the terrified animals, he positioned himself between the cattle and disaster, waving his arms and shouting. For a moment, it seemed to work, until his horse lost footing on the slick earth, throwing Heath violently to the ground. Searing pain shot through his leg as he attempted to stand. Through the curtain of rain, he could see his horse disappearing into the trees and the cattle veering away from the ravine. But in a crueler twist of fate, several were now charging directly toward him. Unable to move quickly enough, Heath braced himself for the inevitable. A rifle shot cracked through the air, then another. The thundering hoofs changed course once more. Through blurred vision, Heath made out a figure on horseback expertly herding the cattle away from where he lay injured. More gunshots, precise and controlled, turned the stampede toward a clearing visible through the trees. Before Heath lost consciousness, he glimpsed a slender silhouette dismounting and running toward him, rain-soaked blonde hair escaping from beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Violet had heard the commotion from the trading post. Years of frontier living had taught her to distinguish between natural sounds and those signaling trouble. The unmistakable rumble of stampeding cattle had drawn her outside despite the storm. When she spotted the fallen cowboy in the direct path of the panicked animals, she'd acted on pure instinct, firing her rifle to redirect the herd toward the fenced meadow behind her property. Only after securing the gate did she return to the motionless figure lying in the mud. "Can you hear me?" she called, kneeling beside him. Blood mingled with rain on his face from a gash on his forehead, and his right leg lay at an unnatural angle. Despite his injuries, she noted his youth, perhaps only a few years older than herself, and the strong, clean-shaven jaw now clenched in pain. When he didn't respond, Violet made a quick assessment. The storm was intensifying, and moving him alone would be nearly impossible. Just as she prepared to ride for help, she heard voices calling through the downpour. "Boss! Heath, where are you?" Relief flooded through her as she spotted riders approaching. "Over here," she shouted, waving her arms. "Your friend is hurt." With the help of Heath's concerned ranch hands, they transported him to the trading post. Violet directed them to place him on her father's bed. She had already moved her ailing parent to her own smaller room, knowing the injured cowboy would need space for proper treatment. "Ma'am, we sure appreciate your help," said Emmett, removing his hat respectfully. "Those shots saved both our boss and likely half our herd." "Your cattle are secure in our meadow for now," Violet replied, gathering medical supplies. "They'll have shelter from the worst of the storm there." As she cleaned Heath's wound, his eyes fluttered open, revealing a startling blue that momentarily caught her off guard. Confusion crossed his face before recognition dawned. "You're the one who fired those shots," he murmured, voice rough with pain. "Violet Blackburn," she introduced herself simply. "This is my father's trading post. You've broken your leg, Mr. O'Malley." "Heath O'Malley." He attempted to sit up, but fell back with a groan. "My cattle are safe," she assured him, "though you nearly weren't. What possessed you to stand in front of a stampede?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Seemed like a good idea at the time." "Well, Mr. O'Malley, your good idea has earned you several weeks of recovery. That leg needs proper setting, and you're not going anywhere in this weather." Heath's expression darkened. "Weeks? Impossible. I have to get those cattle to Virginia City before winter." "You have men who can continue the drive," she countered firmly. "Unless you prefer to die of fever or a poorly healed break that leaves you crippled for life." Their eyes locked in silent battle, neither willing to yield. Finally, Heath sighed. "My men need a trail boss. I can't ask them to continue without leadership." "Then they'll wait," Violet stated with a finality that brooked no argument. The storm has made that decision for you. As if emphasizing her point, a violent gust of wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance came the ominous sound of a tree crashing to earth. When Emmett and the others confirmed the trail ahead had likely suffered washouts that would require scouting before proceeding anyway, Heath reluctantly conceded to reality. The drive would have to pause while he healed. It was a bitter pill for a man who believed that stopping meant failing, that vulnerability invited disaster. That night, as fever took hold of Heath, he drifted between consciousness and haunting dreams. Civil War battlefields blended with cattle stampedes, and throughout it all, a pair of steady hands kept drawing him back from the brink, a gentle voice anchoring him to life. "You're safe," the voice would say. "Keep fighting." And despite his lifelong belief that he was better off relying only on himself, he found himself trusting those words, clinging to them like a lifeline in a storm-tossed sea. Days blurred together as Violet tended to both injured Cowboy and ailing father. Heath's fever broke after the third night, but the fractured leg would require weeks of immobility. Meanwhile, her father's condition continued its slow decline, each labored breath a painful reminder of what she would soon face alone. By the second week, Heath had become increasingly restless, insisting on being propped up to review trail maps with his men, who'd established a temporary camp near the trading post. "You're a terrible patient," Violet observed one morning as she changed his bandages. "Has anyone ever told you that?" "Never been laid up long enough to find out," he replied, wincing as she examined his healing leg. "I don't like feeling useless." "There's a difference between being temporarily incapacitated and useless," she corrected, meeting his gaze directly. "Your men respect you enough to wait. That counts for something." Heath studied her face, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "You look exhausted. Who helps you with the trading post, and your father while you're playing nurse to an ungrateful cowboy?" The unexpected question caught Violet off guard. Most visitors to the post rarely noticed her struggles, seeing only what they needed from the transaction. "I manage," she said simply, but the slight tremble in her hands betrayed her. That afternoon, Heath convinced his men to help around the trading post. Emmett took over cooking duties, preparing meals for everyone including Violet's father. Others repaired the storm damage to the barn and corral fences. When miners came to trade, Heath's men helped with inventory and loading supplies. "You didn't have to do this," Violet told Heath that evening, bringing him supper. "Consider it partial payment for saving my life and putting up with my poor temperament," he replied. "Besides, your father needs you more than the post does right now." The unexpected kindness brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she quickly blinked away. "Thank you," she whispered, turning to leave before he could see her vulnerability. "Violet," he called softly, stopping her at the door. "You don't have to carry everything alone." The words struck something deep within her, a truth she'd refused to acknowledge in her determination to prove her independence. She nodded once, unable to speak, and slipped from the room. As April turned to May, an unexpected rhythm developed at the trading post. Heath began to move about on crutches, supervising his men as they helped maintain the property. Violet found herself with time to properly care for her father, whose lucid moments grew increasingly rare. During one such moment, James Blackburn beckoned Heath to his bedside. "You seem a decent sort, O'Malley," the older man said, his voice barely audible. "When I'm gone, there will be those who try to force my daughter from this place. A woman alone." He paused, gathering strength. "Promise me you'll ensure she has a fair chance at keeping what's hers." Heath nodded solemnly. "You have my word, sir." What neither man realized was that Violet had entered silently, overhearing the exchange. The request ignited a complex mixture of gratitude and indignation within her. While she appreciated her father's concern, the implication that she needed male protection to maintain her rightful property stung deeply. Later, she confronted Heath outside as he supervised the branding of newborn calves from his herd. "I don't need someone to fight my battles," she stated without preamble. "I've managed this post through blizzards, supply shortages, and hostile encounters. I'll continue doing so after my father passes and your leg heals." Heath regarded her thoughtfully, noting the proud tilt of her chin despite the grief already shadowing her eyes. "I have no doubt of your capabilities, Miss Blackburn, but even the strongest among us sometimes need allies, not out of weakness but practicality. And you'll be gone within weeks," she countered. What good are temporary allies? His eyes held her steadily. Some connections, however brief, leave lasting impacts. The simple statement disarmed her anger, replacing it with an unsettling awareness of how Heath's presence had already altered her carefully constructed solitude. In just a month, he had shifted from stranger to what? Not quite friend, yet something more than simply a patient or guest. As May progressed, the cattle drive preparations resumed. Heath's leg had healed enough for him to ride short distances, though Emmett continued handling most physical tasks. Their departure date approached, coinciding with increasingly worrying news from passing travelers. Land office in Virginia City is selling unclaimed parcels next month, one miner informed them while purchasing supplies. Even some that folks thought were properly staked. Governments saying documentation wasn't filed correctly. Violet felt a chill at this information. Her father had always handled the legal aspects of their claim, and she suddenly realized she had never seen the official paperwork. That night, she searched frantically through his desk, finding only partial documents with signatures she couldn't verify. When Heath found her surrounded by papers, distress evident on her face, she reluctantly explained the situation. If the claim isn't properly registered, I could lose everything when Pa. She couldn't finish the sentence. Heath sat beside her, examining the documents. These look legitimate, but incomplete. When's the last time your father visited the land office? Before his illness. At least 6 months ago. Heath's expression grew serious. The moment my leg is strong enough, we should ride to Virginia City. Better to address this now than after. He paused, then added gently, while your father can still verify his claim. The unspoken truth hung between them. James Blackburn was dying, perhaps within days. Any legal matters would need his testimony while he still maintained lucidity. 2 days later, James Blackburn passed peacefully in his sleep. Violet's grief, though expected, hit with devastating force. Heath and his men respectfully handled the burial arrangements, allowing her space to mourn while ensuring the trading post continued functioning. The day after the funeral, Heath found Violet at her father's grave behind the cabin, her honey-blonde hair blowing loose in the spring breeze. The men and I will stay another week, he said quietly. Give you time to settle affairs. She turned, eyes red but dry. You have a cattle drive to complete. You've already delayed too long on my account. The cattle will wait, he replied with surprising gentleness. Some things matter more. In that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement that whatever bound them together had grown beyond obligation or gratitude. Heath, who had spent years avoiding attachments, found himself unwilling to ride away while Violet faced both grief and potential loss of her home. And Violet, despite her fierce independence, recognized the wisdom in accepting help when offered without conditions. The following morning brought unexpected trouble. 3 riders approached the trading post, led by a well-dressed man who introduced himself as Thomas Whitley, representative of the Montana Mining Consortium. Miss Blackburn, my condolences on your loss. He began with practiced sympathy that never reached his eyes. I've come to discuss the future of this property. Violet's spine stiffened. The future is quite simple, Mr. Whitley. I'll continue operating as my father did. Whitley's smile thinned. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Your father's claim was provisional, pending improvements and continuous occupation. As a single woman, you cannot legally maintain a claim this size without a male relative or husband. That's not true, Heath interjected, stepping forward. Though still using a walking stick, he carried himself with unmistakable authority. The Homestead Act makes no such distinction for female claimants. And who might you be? Whitley asked coldly. Heath O'Malley. Miss Blackburn saved my life during last month's storm. Well, Mr. O'Malley, while the law may technically allow female claimants, the territorial courts have consistently ruled that frontier properties require proper management. The consortium has already filed a counterclaim based on abandoned status. Abandoned? Violet's voice rose in outrage. We've operated continuously for 5 years. Your father abandoned proper legal procedure, Whitley countered smoothly. His final documentation was never properly filed. But I'm not unreasonable. We're prepared to offer fair compensation for your personal belongings. Heath moved closer to Violet, their shoulders nearly touching. We'll need to see this counterclaim documentation, and we'll be visiting the land office ourselves next week. Whitley's expression hardened. I wouldn't bother. The matter is essentially settled. You have 1 week to vacate before the sheriff enforces our claim. After the unwelcome visitors departed, Violet's composure finally broke. They're stealing my home because I'm a woman alone, she said bitterly. Everything my father built, everything we built together, gone because of some paperwork technicality. Heath watched her pace the trading post's main room, her grief now transformed into righteous anger. Something stirred in him, a protective instinct he'd long suppressed after losing his family. This woman who had saved his life was now facing a battle she couldn't win alone, not because she lacked courage or capability, but because a system was stacked against her. We'll leave for Virginia City tomorrow, he decided. My leg can handle the ride. We'll get to the bottom of these claims. Violet stopped pacing. Your cattle drive. Emmett can lead the men ahead to secure grazing rights. I'll catch up after we've resolved this. She studied his face, searching for ulterior motives, but finding only genuine concern. Why would you delay your livelihood for my problem? Heath considered her question carefully. The truth was that he barely understood his own motivations. By all logic, he should continue his drive. The cattle represented his entire future. And yet, you saved my life, he said simply. That creates a debt not easily repaid. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was all he could articulate of the complex emotions that had developed during his recovery under her care. The journey to Virginia City took 3 days, with Heath's injury necessitating frequent rests. During these stops, they found themselves sharing stories they'd never told others. Heath's experiences in the war, Violet's memories of her mother, their shared dreams of building something lasting in this harsh but beautiful territory. I always thought independence meant standing completely alone, Violet admitted one evening beside their small campfire. My father tried to tell me otherwise, but I was too stubborn to listen. Heath prodded the embers thoughtfully. After losing my family, I convinced myself attachments were dangerous, that caring for others was a luxury I couldn't afford on the frontier. Every man for himself was safer. And now? She asked quietly. He looked up, the firelight illuminating features that had grown increasingly dear to her. Now I'm not so certain. The land office in Virginia City confirmed their worst fears. The Blackburn claim had indeed been filed incompletely, with crucial signatures missing from the final documentation. Furthermore, the mining consortium had significant influence with territorial officials. I don't see much recourse, Miss Blackburn, the clerk explained apologetically. Unless you can demonstrate continuous improvement and have a male signatory to strengthen your position. A male signatory, Violet repeated bitterly, meaning a husband or male relative. Precisely, the clerk confirmed. The courts consistently favor family operations over single claimants in disputed territories. Outside the office, Violet struggled to contain her disappointment. 5 years of our lives, and it comes down to whether I have a husband. The improvements, the trading relationships we built, the services we provided to travelers, none of it matters. Heath remained unusually quiet as they secured rooms at the local hotel. Only after dinner did he finally speak the thoughts that had been forming throughout the day. There might be a solution, he began carefully. One that would secure your claim legally while allowing you to maintain control of the trading post. She looked at him questioningly. Marriage, he stated simply. Violet's eyes widened. Are you suggesting a marriage of convenience? Heath clarified quickly. On paper, I would become the male signatory the land office requires. In practice, you would continue running the trading post, as you always have. And what would you gain from this arrangement? She asked, skepticism evident. Heath considered his answer carefully. The trading post is strategically located for cattle drives moving north. As a partner, I could establish a way station for future drives, perhaps expand into breeding stock rather than just moving Texas Longhorns. It was a practical answer, one that made sense from a business perspective. Yet something in his voice suggested other motivations he wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. Violet studied him across the table, this man who had entered her life through chance and catastrophe. In just weeks, he had transformed from stranger to patient to ally. The proposition was practical, logical, exactly the kind of arrangement frontier necessity often demanded. So why did her heart race at the suggestion? I would need assurances, she said finally. Written agreement that the trading post remains under my management, that any expansion would be mutually agreed upon. Heath nodded. Of course. We would be partners in the truest sense, each bringing different strengths to build something neither could create alone. And if either of us should wish to dissolve the arrangement later, she pressed. A flash of something like hurt crossed his features before he masked it. We would divide assets fairly, according to contribution. They spent the evening drafting a detailed agreement, both clinging to practicality while dancing around the growing tension between them. Neither acknowledged that their business arrangement felt increasingly like something else, something neither was prepared to name. The next morning, they stood before a justice of the peace, exchanging vows with solemn determination rather than romantic sentiment. When Heath slipped a simple gold band onto Violet's finger, purchased hastily that morning from a local jeweler, his hand lingered perhaps longer than necessary. "You may kiss your bride," the justice announced. Their eyes met, suddenly uncertain. What had seemed straightforward in theory now carried unexpected weight in practice. Heath leaned forward slowly, giving Violet every opportunity to offer merely her cheek. Instead, she tilted her face upward, and their lips met in a brief but unmistakably genuine kiss that left both stunned by the jolt of connection. Back at the land office, their marriage certificate and Heath's status as a property owner and businessman carried immediate influence. The clerk revised the Blackburn claim, now the O'Malley claim, with visible deference. "The consortium may still contest this," he warned, "but your position is much stronger now." As they rode back toward the trading post, the reality of their hasty decision began to sink in. They were legally bound together, two independent souls who had spent years avoiding exactly this kind of connection. "We should discuss practical matters," Violet said as they made camp the first night. "Living arrangements, division of responsibilities." Heath nodded, maintaining a careful distance across the fire. "I'll need to complete my cattle drive, which could take another month. After delivery, I can return to help with expansion." "And where will you stay when you return?" she asked, the question hanging loaded between them. He met her eyes steadily. "That depends entirely on what you're comfortable with, Violet. This arrangement can be whatever we need it to be." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. Unlike Whitley and his consortium, who had attempted to manipulate and control, Heath offered partnership without demands. It was a rare quality on the frontier, where survival often came at others' expense. "We have time to figure it out," she said finally. "One step at a time." Their return to the trading post coincided with an unexpected visit from Whitley and his men, clearly surprised to find them back so soon, and together. "Miss Blackburn, I believe our timeline was clear," Whitley began imperiously. "That's Mrs. O'Malley now," Heath corrected, dismounting and helping Violet down with newfound protectiveness. "And we've just returned from filing updated documentation on our claim." Whitley's face registered shock, then calculation. "A rather convenient marriage, wouldn't you say?" "The courts may view such hasty arrangements skeptically." "The courts recognize legal marriage regardless of timing," Heath countered. "But feel free to contest it. In the meantime, you're trespassing on private property." After Whitley and his men departed, issuing vague threats about this not being over, Heath turned to find Violet watching him with an unreadable expression. "What?" he asked. "Mrs. O'Malley," she repeated softly. "It sounds strange." Heath's confidence faltered. "Do you regret our arrangement already?" She shook her head slowly. "Not regret. It's just happening so quickly. Yesterday, I was Violet Blackburn, determined to stand alone. Today, I'm someone's wife. Not just someone's," he reminded her gently. "And not a typical wife, either. You're still the capable woman who saved my life and runs this trading post. That hasn't changed." Yet they both knew something fundamental had indeed changed between them, something neither was quite ready to name. The following week brought challenges and adjustments as they navigated their new reality. Heath's cattle drive departed with Emmett in charge, while Heath remained to help fortify their claim against further challenges. They established separate sleeping quarters, maintaining the pretense of their practical arrangement even as their easy companionship deepened daily. Working side by side, they expanded the trading post's offerings, combining Violet's knowledge of local needs with Heath's connections to Texas suppliers. Their complementary skills created a synergy neither had expected, transforming the modest outpost into a true hub for travelers and local settlers alike. "We make a good team," Heath observed one evening as they reviewed the day's transactions. Violet nodded. increasingly aware of how naturally they had fallen into partnership. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "I've spent so long proving I didn't need help that I never considered the difference between needing and benefiting from it. And I convinced myself connections were liabilities," Heath replied. "That caring for someone meant inevitable pain when the frontier claimed them." Their eyes met across the table, acknowledging the unspoken truth that their arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated. The practical partnership had awakened deeper feelings, creating a bond that transcended their original agreement. Before they could explore this revelation further, a writer arrived with alarming news. The mining consortium had filed a legal injunction claiming their marriage was fraudulent, specifically arranged to circumvent property laws. A hearing was scheduled in Virginia City the following week. "They won't give up," Violet said bitterly after the messenger departed. "Not until they've taken everything." Heath's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Our partnership may have begun practically, but that doesn't make it fraudulent." The night before they were to depart for the hearing, a summer storm reminiscent of the one that had first brought them together swept through the valley. As thunder shook the trading post windows, Heath found Violet standing on the covered porch, watching lightning illuminate the mountains. "Reminds me of the night you saved my life," he said, joining her at the railing. She smiled faintly. "You were a terrible patient, and you were a miracle I wasn't expecting." The words escaped before he could censor them, revealing more than he'd intended. Violet turned to face him fully. "Heath, if the hearing goes against us tomorrow—" "It won't," he interrupted with more confidence than he felt. "But if it does," she persisted, "I want you to know that regardless of how our arrangement began, these past weeks have been—" She struggled to find words adequate to express the transformation she'd undergone, from fiercely independent to understanding the strength found in true partnership. Heath stepped closer, no longer maintaining the careful distance they'd established. "Violet, when I proposed this marriage, I told myself it was practical, necessary. But the truth is—" He paused, gathering courage to voice feelings he'd denied even to himself. "The truth is, I was already falling in love with you. The woman who saved my life, who showed me that strength isn't about standing alone, but about choosing who to stand beside." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Violet's eyes widened, searching his face for any sign of insincerity or manipulation. Finding none, she reached up to touch his cheek with trembling fingers. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid that caring for you would mean losing myself, that needing you would make me weak." "And now?" he asked, covering her hand with his own. "Now I understand that the right connection doesn't diminish strength, it multiplies it." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "I love you, Heath O'Malley. Not because you saved my home or gave me your name, but because you saw me, truly saw me, and valued what you saw." The distance between them vanished as Heath drew her into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss unlike their brief ceremonial one. This was a seal on truth long denied, on feelings that had grown organically through shared hardship and mutual respect. When they arrived at the Virginia City courthouse the next day, they no longer played at marriage but embodied it, their unified front evident to all who observed them. The hearing began with Whitley's lawyer presenting their case for fraud. This convenient marriage occurred mere hours after Miss Blackburn learned her claim was in jeopardy, he argued smoothly. Clearly an attempt to circumvent proper legal channels through deception. When Heath and Violet's turn came, they presented not only their legal documentation but testimony from travelers who had witnessed their growing relationship during Heath's recovery. Emmett had ridden hard from the cattle drive to speak on their behalf, describing how naturally they had formed a partnership long before making it official. "Your Honor," Heath concluded, "it's true our marriage began with practical considerations. The frontier often demands pragmatic decisions for survival. But what began as necessity has become the foundation for something genuine and lasting." He turned to Violet, taking her hand publicly. "I love my wife. Not because she saved my life on the trail, though she did. Not because she offered me a partnership in her trading post, though it's prospering under our joint care. I love her because she embodies everything I admire: courage, integrity, and a spirit that refuses to be broken by circumstance." Violet blinked back unexpected tears as she addressed the judge. 5 years ago, my father and I built something from nothing in that valley. The consortium wants to take it not because they have legitimate claim, but because they have power and influence. My husband and I ask only for the opportunity to continue building our life together on land we've rightfully cultivated. After deliberation, the judge ruled in their favor, citing insufficient evidence of fraudulent intent and noting that frontier marriages often began with practical considerations before developing deeper bonds. The court finds the O'Malley claim valid and the marriage legitimate, he declared. The mining consortium's petition is denied. As they left the courthouse victorious, Heath lifted Violet in a celebratory embrace that drew approving smiles from onlookers. Their journey back to the trading post, now truly their home, was filled with plans and possibilities neither had dared imagine months earlier. 2 years later, the trading post had transformed into a thriving way station for cattle drives and a supply hub for surrounding homesteads. Heath had successfully established a breeding operation using select stock from his original drive, while Violet had expanded their trading relationships to include markets as far away as San Francisco. On the anniversary of the storm that had first brought them together, they stood on their porch watching their 1-year-old daughter take wobbly steps across the yard, her determination a perfect blend of both parents' resilience. "Did you ever imagine this?" Violet asked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "When you were lying injured in that storm, did you picture any of this?" Heath shook his head, tightening his arm around her waist. "I was too busy clinging to old beliefs, that the frontier was no place for love, that attachments were dangerous, that I was better off alone." "And now?" she prompted, echoing their conversation from years before. He turned her gently to face him, the love in his eyes unmistakable. "Now I know better. The frontier isn't conquered by those who stand alone, but by those who build together. You saved my life that day, Violet, not just from the stampede, but from the loneliness I'd convinced myself was strength. And you gave me your name," she added softly, "but more importantly, your heart." As their daughter tottered toward them, giggling with triumph at her newfound mobility, Heath and Violet O'Malley embraced their shared truth, that in the wild heart of the American West, they had discovered the most valuable claim of all, a love strong enough to weather any storm, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership. Their trading post stood as testament to what could be accomplished when two independent spirits chose to journey together, their complementary strengths creating something neither could have built alone. What had begun with a life saved on the trail had blossomed into a legacy that would endure long after the frontier itself had vanished into history.